Hello and welcome to Wednesday Warfare, where I review NXT and AEW Dynamite back-to-back and try and figure out which show won for the week. One more reminder for tomorrow at 12 noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, my live watch-along and riffing of Ultimate Deathmatch with my special guests Matthew from Botchamania and Pacific Northwest-based wrestler Ethan HD, who actually starred in this godforsaken piece of crap film. It's going to be a great time reliving the horrors of this movie, as it's going to be a live fundraiser for Feeding America. It's happening Thursday afternoon. I hope you can check it out. And now, like what you like, don't be a dick, let's begin. NXT opens up with a tag match as Johnny Gargano and Austin Theory take on Leon Ruff and Kushida, who's filling in for Damian Priest, who got laid out last week by a returning Karrion Kross. The Garganos and their respective stooges are now just called The Way. I mean, anyone can see that the road that they walk on is paved in gold. A scary moment for Ruff early in the match here. He goes for a top rope dive to the outside, takes a nasty spill on his way down, but is able to carry on. The match ends when he hits a flying cutter and his crucifix slam on Johnny, but Austin Theory did a blind tag, and he kicks Leon in the head, hits his finisher to win the match. So going from a big losing streak leading to him quitting on air, and now to being his first match back, he actually wins. A big turnaround for Theory here. A solid opening tag team match, but where are they going without ever knowing the way? We see Dexter Lumis on this big elevated platform near the crowd area. We'll be seeing him a few times throughout the night as he occasionally draws on his iPad. And then we also see backstage Toni Storm being interviewed about her match with Rhea Ripley coming up. She says that she's the reason that Ripley is in NXT right now, because she ran her out of NXT UK when she beat her for the Women's Championship a while ago. And then we see SHOTZI Blackheart being interviewed elsewhere. She says she's miffed that, Candice LeRae calls herself a general now after War Games, and she alleges that the Garganos stole that trophy from a Little League team. It's Tyler Rust's first official match at NXT as he takes on Tommaso Ciampa, so no pressure. Ciampa's got a chair set up at ringside to invite Timothy Thatcher to come sit and watch, and Thatcher does eventually show up, but at first I thought that he wasn't going to show up and Ciampa would just pull a Clint Eastwood and cut a promo on an empty chair. Thatch takes an accidental kick from his protege Rust on the outside, and then the referees come and basically separate and pull Thatcher to the back as the match continues, and Rust looks really good here. This is not some mere squash match against a newcomer here by the former NXT champion. It's very competitive. Ciampa eventually wins out though with a big running knee followed by Willow's belt to win. It's a good match and a really impressive first showing for Tyler here, and the announcers really put him over in a big way. Wade Barrett goes as far as to say we have a future superstar on our hands with this kid, so that's some really high praise. And then after the match, Thatcher comes back out and kind of gets in Ciampa's face. He's still pulled away by the referees, and then during the commercial break we also see Malcolm Bivens trying to hype up Tyler after the match is over, and he walks out with him after they do a fist bump. So I like how every time we see Russ, like Thatcher's there to help Tyler, and then after whatever they do, Bivens is there to also kind of clean up and try and further recruit Tyler to his organization. So I'm really curious to see who's going to ultimately win out in that power struggle between Bivens and Thatcher. We had a couple of vignettes here, one from the grizzled young veterans who talk about how much momentum they were building at the beginning of the year before the pandemic happened, and they are soon to be recognized as number one. And then we see a Karrion Kross vignette where he says Doomsday is still coming, some spooky hourglass imagery, and Dexter Lumis still drawing. Up next, Pete Dunne versus Kyle O'Reilly, where the winner will face Finn Balor for the NXT title at New Year's Evil. Before the matchup, we got Drake Maverick and Killian Dane jumping Oni Lorcan and Danny Burch on the outside, then the Undisputed Era join in, then suddenly Breezango come flying in, literally, and all those teams brawl their way to the back, and so it's just one-on-one between Dunne and O'Reilly. This match is just a big knocky-draggy, the kind of physical, technical, hard-hitting stuff you can easily expect from both of these guys. They beat the hell out of each other in this matchup. We got a canned "This is awesome" chant followed immediately by a real "Fight Forever" chant in this match. Dunne wants to go for the bitter end on the apron, but Kyle's able to counter into kind of a suplex off the apron, hits the big diving knee drop to the back of Dunne's head to win the matchup. So he's going to have a rematch with Finn for the championship at New Year's Evil, and this match itself was great. A late contender for Match of the Year candidate for NXT, in my opinion. Go check this one out. It's a lot of fun. Backstage, Rhea Ripley is asked about her face-off with Raquel Gonzalez at the end of last week's show. She says that Raquel's a different animal when she's by herself compared to when she's backed up with all her friends. She also talks about Toni Storm, saying that Toni is the same piece of trash she knew back at NXT UK and will finish her once and for all. We get a little promo advertising that Bronson Reed's coming back next week, and then we get Karrion Kross in his first match back since coming back from his injury against Desmond Troy. It's over pretty darn quickly. Pretty much every other stellar match. Cross has been in NXT, hits the Cross jacket to win, and then afterward, he looks right in the camera and calls out Damian Priest, tells him to tuck his chin and get ready for a beating at New Year's Evil. So we know that match is happening for sure. Backstage with Isaiah Swerve Scott, he's asked why he rejected Jake Atlas's handshake after his loss to Jake last week, and Isaiah admits he hates to lose to people with less experience than him, but he'll make up for it next week with a rematch. So Scott leaves the shot, and then in come Everrise. They just barge in and start yelling at the interviewer, Mackenzie, and they say that, you know, the Triple Threat Tag Team match they were in last week was basically a handicap match, so it's not fair, and they're asking that the match be removed from the record books, and Goldberg, we're coming for your streak, is what they basically say. They take offense to Mackenzie's follow-up questions about that, and they wrap it up by just yelling, Everrise rules. I'm really digging Everrise right now. I like their attitude and their energy. Dexter Lumis still on that platform, still drawing the New Year's Evil logo, and the camera pans to reveal that he's drawing that he is the host of New Year's Evil in a few weeks. I think Wade Barrett put it best. How can he be the host when he doesn't talk? We then get a Finn Balor promo where he says that at TakeOver 31, Kyle O'Reilly took him to the limit, broke his jaw, but he still lost. And he says that this match is not going to be Balor O'Reilly 2, it will be Balor O'Reilly the end. A grudge match in your main event as Toni Storm takes on Rhea Ripley. Interesting call by Beth Phoenix on commentary during Rhea's entrance where she says, you know, at one time she was the biggest superstar in the world. Like, I know she was super popular this time last year, but I don't know about that. Some good back and forth in the matchup here. It ends when Raquel Gonzalez kind of awkwardly runs in at first, but then when the referee's back's turned, she catches Rhea on her shoulder and hucks her into the ring post. That allows Toni to hit Storm 0 to win the matchup. It was a good main event. I like how it escalates the Raquel Gonzalez-Rhea Ripley feud. I'm really excited for that inevitable blow-off, but I thought it was a curious choice that that was the main event match, because as good as it was, I think that Dunne and O'Reilly was a whole lot better. So, I mean, but what do you folks think about it? Do you think that the order of the matches was fine the way it was, or would you have rather seen Dunne and O'Reilly main event? Does it even matter? Let me know in the comments section. Dynamite begins this week with a 6-man tag match as Hangman Page teams with Alex Reynolds and John Silver of the Dark Order against Matt Hardy and Private Party. Hardy Party. I love the shtick with Reynolds and Silver as is, but them teaming up with Page here and how Hangman's kind of playing like the straight man to their adorable shenanigans, I think it's just great stuff. Also, you can tell Matt Hardy working heel tonight because he has the shiny golden pants. At one point, Hardy hits the twist of fate onto Silver off the apron, but in doing so, you can see Silver really bang his leg, it seems, against the bottom of the ring frame. So I hope he's okay. He was selling it pretty hard. It didn't look like he was selling, actually. It looked like he was just really hurt. Anyway, the Private Party hit the gin and juice onto Reynolds. Then Matt just tags himself in and covers him to win. So I thought it was a fun opening match. I like the dynamic with Hangman and the Dark Order. Like I said, I wonder where that relationship's going to go, since Paige is kind of a lost soul at this point. And also Matt getting progressively more heelish as the weeks go on. We've seen this play out on Twitter if you follow him. He's very full of himself on Twitter right now. And so we seem to get a reflection of that in the stuff here in the match. So we'll see where that character goes as well. We're backstage with the Inner Circle and we see MJF holding a plaque that commemorates his mention in a recent New York Times article that says Dinner Debonair was one of the best performances of 2020. So suck it, haters. MJF throwing some big shade Jericho's way, kind of like echoing what the author of that article said, kind of throwing Jericho under the bus basically, and how MJF was the star of that performance, but he turns it around by saying he couldn't have done it without Jericho and that Jericho's his best friend, and Chris kind of accepts that through gritted teeth. We get a special video message from Cody and Brandy Rhodes where they announce they're expecting a child next year, so good for them and Mazel Tov. And up next, Cody takes on Angelico of TH2 in singles action. It's a good competitive match here. It's fast-paced and just the right amount of flippy. One great moment here is when Angelico gets Cody in a Navarro lock, and Cody gets the rope break by biting onto the rope. Cody ends up winning with a good-looking Cody cutter. Team Taz show up after the match to kind of congratulate Cody in a very backhanded way. They call out Darby Allin up in the rafters, says Brian Cage will kick his ass for the TNT Championship. Taz now threatens to put Cody on paternity leave, but the lights go out and it's Sting! He shows up once again. Powerhouse Hobbs actually stands up to him at first until Sting pulls up the bat, and then he's restrained and Team Taz runs off. And so Cody stands there, Sting stands there, Darby stands there. We're all just standing there as we end the segment here. So I'm wondering what Sting has in store for Cody and Darby. Also, I wonder if 3 weeks in a row Sting doing this might be a bit of too much diminishing returns. I don't know. Miro's interviewed backstage backstage. They say he's been fined $75,000 for his actions last week where he beat up a bunch of crew members. MIRO says his problem with Orange Cassidy is that Orange doesn't care about anything that's important to the success of AEW. So he basically says that Orange owes him $75 grand. Announces that next week he will have a big announcement as regards to Kip Sabian and Penelope Ford's wedding date. And Alex Marvez goes, well, what about the people you've hospitalized? It's Christmas. And MIRO goes, bah humbug. Also, it's my birthday. And speaking of the season, I guess it's Festivus time because here comes the airing of the grievances from Eddie Kingston. He's in the ring to address his enemies, so I guess we could be here a while. This could be the final portion of the show. So he says his first enemy is God, his next enemy is Pac, who he says that his career is done, and then he says his next enemy is Lance Archer, and immediately Archer shows up to start beating him down. Then out come the Butcher and the Blade and the Bunny and the Blade and the Butcher and the Bunny and the Butcher, and they come out to beat Archer down. Suddenly out come the Lucha Brothers and Pac, whose career is not over, and they all has fight. And as the good guys clear out the ring of the bad guys, we see a bit of conflict between Pac and Archer, basically kind of see who gets a piece of Kingston first. And so the bad guys run away. I thought it was a good segment here. I like how it's setting up, more of the conflict between Kingston and his group against the Death Triangle. Lance Archer as a babyface is something I didn't really see coming in 2020, but I like the potential of him kind of in that just monster babyface role. Dustin Rhodes is backstage talking about the Dark Order's invitation last week. He says that 7 was a bad idea years ago and that 7's a bad idea now. He plans to take down the Dark Order one by one, continuing with Evil Uno next week. On we go to a 12-man tag team match as the Best Friends, Top Flight, and Varsity Blondes take on the Inner Circle, sans Wardlow. This was originally billed as a 14-man tag team match, but now Orange Cassidy's at the announcer's desk with a headset that's not plugged in, and Wardlow is just nowhere to be found this evening. JR on commentary does a great job putting the Varsity Blondes over here. He evokes Brian Pillman's late father, Brian Sr., and he compares Griff Garrison to a young Edge, which, that's high praise there. Hard to keep track of everything going on in this match because of all the bodies, but we see some kind of revival of the feud between Santana and Ortiz and the Best Friends. Some good looks by Top Flight here in this match. In the end, Jericho hits Griff Garrison from behind with a baseball bat, which allows Jake Hager to hit the worst looking F10 I've ever seen, and then he tags MJF, I should say, who just walks right in and pins Griff to win. So kind of a similar finish in that way to the 6-man we saw at the top of the show. Then afterward, Top Flight chase off Jericho and MJF in the Inner Circle Powder. We find out next week that Jericho and MJF will take on Top Flight in the tag team match. This was what it was. It wasn't going to be an amazing match because of all the people involved in this thing, but at least we didn't get the big, huddle up and wait for the dive spot that JR complained about last week, right? Alex Marvez backstage with Thunder Rosa, who's got a bone to pick with Britt Baker for originally interfering in her NWA Women's title match with Serena Deeb, so now she's coming after Britt. Suddenly in comes Reba Rebel, who talks trash to Thunder. That's just a setup for Britt to attack Thunder from behind. She puts Thunder in the lockjaw while Reba Rebel pours water all over Thunder's face, kind of smearing and getting rid of the makeup or the face paint on her face. And then Britt asks if her ugly face broke the camera. Ooh, it's getting personal now. My favorite part of this, though, is as we come out of that scene, JR goes, well, we know what paybacks are, right, Tony? And Tony goes, yeah, they're a bitch. Up next, SCU take on the Acclaimed as they make their entrance. Max Caster opens with a rap against SCU. Kazarian responds with some bars of his own, and I guess he's considered the winner of that rap battle. Way to get the new gimmick over by having Kaz beat Caster at his own game, I guess. It's a solid tag team match. The Acclaimed win after Caster hits Daniels with the boombox. The referee's not looking. So it's a big win for this young tag team. And then afterward, Caster does a rap on the Young Bucks, who are sitting at ringside. Anthony Bowens challenges them to a tag title match for next week, and it appears it's going to be happening. In your 4th tag team match of the night, Ivelisse and Diamante take on Big Swole and Serena Deeb. And if that's not enough tag team goodness for you, as the intros are happening, they confirm those 2 tag matches that we teased earlier, MJF and Jericho versus Top Flight, and the Young Bucks versus the Acclaimed. A lot of tag team matches. It's kind of exhausting after a while, really. Serena hits a sweet neck breaker on Ivelisse in the ropes and a gutbuster. The match ends and Swole hits a modified cloverleaf on Diamante as Ivelisse is held at bay. After the match, though, Nyla Rose comes out and starts mowing down Serena, and the heels take over. Red Velvet shows up and cleans house with the chair. So I think it's a good follow-up to the scuffle we saw last week. I'm curious to see more about Red Velvet. I know she's been predominantly on Dark, and we saw a little bit of her so far on Dynamite. I think if we saw more kind of like a talent profile on her, as this angle goes along, I think it goes a long way into making us care about Red Velvet in this this battle with all these different ladies. We hear from the best friends outside the venue, and they're mad at MIRO for costing Orange Cassidy the Dynamite Diamond last week, and they basically say they're going to interrupt the wedding announcement for next week. And then we see a Jurassic Express hype package as it advertises another tag team match for next week, and FTR interrupted the announce desk, and they're really mad. They ask, is the tag division an afterthought now? Clearly it's not. What show are you watching? They're mad that the Jurassic Express are booked and they aren't, and they make some threats. Main event time, anything goes match as the AEW champion Kenny Omega takes on Joey Janela. A match that was supposed to happen in the first round of the Eliminator tournament a couple of months ago, but Janela couldn't make that because of a COVID scare, and Sonny Kiss took his place. So now the match is happening here. Janela starts out swinging, but Omega fights back. A big weapon beat down here. Don Callis on the house mic starts doing live commentary for the crowd, and then Kenny joins in as well with his own house mic. Ultimately, Janela kind of gets his own kind of comeback with a reverse Hurricane Rana out of the one-winged angel attempt. Dan near spikes himself in the process. A big top rope leg drop onto Omega through a table on the floor. Ultimately, Omega comes back after dodging a moonsault, hits the one-winged angel to win the match, and then afterward, Callis on the mic saying there's no more unanswered questions about Omega's legitimacy as champion. Suddenly out comes Pac and the Lucha Brothers. The Death Triangle interrupt, and Pac basically says you have unfinished business not just with me, but also with Phoenix, because Phoenix was never eliminated from that tournament. He, of course, was taken out due to injury, and Penta took his place in the tournament. So a match has been made for a couple of weeks now for night one of New Year's Bash, as Omega will defend the AEW championship against Phoenix. So big announcement. Omega's pissed, and it sets him up for night one of New Year's Bash as we fade to black. The match itself, it was pretty quick. I think it was, from the intros to the end of the match, it was less than 10 minutes. So you knew it wasn't going to be a big thing. But I think it was, good to show Omega being the heel and Callis being, his wingman, so to speak, his hype man. And yeah, setting some up for a couple weeks from now. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, NXT or AEW Dynamite, and this week I'm going to go with NXT. There was not one match or segment on Dynamite this week that held my interest and got me invested quite like Rust vs. Ciampa or Dunne vs. O'Reilly. I think it was a really strong episode of NXT this week. No real flaws that I could find from watching it. I think AEW had a couple of good matches, but sometimes the emphasis on tag team wrestling can just dominate the shows. When you have that many tag team matches with that many people, especially the 12-man, you lose out on a lot of opportunity to build up characters. And I think that there was a bit too much of that happening this week. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt because, Winter is Coming was a super strong show, and they've got like 3 big shows in a row coming up with the Holiday Bash and the 2-parter for New Year's Bash. So I would imagine they're going to kind of like take it easy this week and last week, and then they'll hopefully pull out all the stops for the next big shows. But I think that, yeah, this last couple weeks for AEW kind of been on the soft side, and NXT is, I think, a better show for a head-to-head this week. But what did you think of NXT and AEW this week? Let me know in the comments section below, and I'll catch you tomorrow for my Ultimate Deathmatch live stream happening. I hope you go watch it live, and if not, it'll be in the archives when it's done. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.